Hello, welcome to Movers and Shakers. I am Diana Dodd, the Public Information Officer for the City of Lansing, Kansas. And with me today, I have State Senator Jeff Klemp. How are you doing?
Very good. Happy to be here. It's the first time since Ken's left.
Right.
So it's new sheriff in town, so I'm excited to be a part of the conversation. A lot of stuff's happening at the Senate, so it's in the legislature, so I'm excited for the conversation.
I am too.
Yeah.
So you just adjourned.
Well, not yet.
Oh.
So there's a period for an override of vetoes, and there's also a little window of opportunity, I think, for maybe some property tax, further property tax opportunities. So we're still trying to fight that through the House. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
All
We
right.
can talk about that.
But 2745 did just pass.
Yep.
And that's the property tax bill that you've been working on it's gone back and forth between the House and the Senate. It's been going on all session, and it's the one that would cap property taxes at 3%.
Yes, there's that language is in there.
It's a 3% raise. They
Yeah.
can't go above 3%.
It's revenue neutral plus
Right.
cost of living adjustment with a cap of 3%.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
And then the latest amendment said that the public can file a protest petition if they want to go above 3%.
Yeah, there's two bills, two almost identical, except one was a vote of the people and one was a petition. So what has been nudged forward was the petition, which is also sponsored by the League of Municipalities. If they're looking at both, they like the petition better.
Okay.
I think because of the pain of the timing of when a vote would be enacted and it creates some stressful timing issues for the local government. So I think they opted on the petition as a best of the two, not recommending either.
Right.
If I remember my conversations with them.
But to be clear, it still has to go to it's on the governor's desk as of Monday, correct?
Yeah, and I think she's going to veto it.
You do?
So I do feel she's going to veto it. I'm hopeful she takes a softer approach and pushes back and says, I might be able to wrap my hands around this if you make some adjustments.
Okay.
I was pushed on by really almost all of my cities. And I think it's a fair push where I was looking to run amendments that had a carve out for new construction and bonding.
Okay.
And if you move that out to the side and it's not invested in your 3% or included in your 3%, it gives a lot of leeway to the community, to the locals for if they have bonds and how they're doing their bonding, or if they have new construction and putting in roads and other things that they would want to put that in, and that doesn't then that wouldn't be impacting it wouldn't be brought into the cap, because you can quickly get to a cap or over a cap when you do those kind of things.
Right.
And I think that would soften a lot of the city's energy around this topic. And I do think it's important on trying to figure out something that's workable for all parties. And, at the end of the day, I'm put in there by citizens that have a strong concern around the pain of whether it's property taxes continuing to go up, mill rates continuing to go up, a series of things that are driving frustrations at the local level. So that is always in the base of my decisions and thought process, because I ran on that. It's really important to me.
Right.
But I do think there might be some middle ground if the governor pushes back. She may just veto it, which it is what it is, and we'd have to see if we have votes to override it. But my push would be, and I tried to run some amendments early. I think there's more appetite now based on the number of votes that were obtained in the House and the Senate.
Okay.
And I think there might be a window of opportunity there.
Okay.
All right.
Well, we'll keep a watch on
We'll
that
see
one.
how that
we'll
goes.
See, we'll
That's
see what
right.
happens.
Yes.
So, in other news, you have taken a very strong interest in economic development in this area.
I have.
And for Lansing in particular, there is the opportunity for an industrial park, we'll say park, on the 50 acres adjacent to LCF, Lansing Correctional Facility.
Yep.
And I understand that the legislature has voted to sell that to the county, but the governor still has to sign that as well.
That's close. Yes.
Okay.
Nice. So They're not going to sell it. They're going to give it back.
Okay.
So back in the 1800s, it was given to them. So I made a push when we were crafting the legislation that I didn't want to go through an acquisition process. I would like the correctional facility, who's been taking advantage of that since then, to give that back. If there would have been a sale early on, if there was a sale back in when it was originally moved over, I would have probably pushed to say, you guys can acquire it. Then it goes out to a bid process. It creates risk that somebody might outbid the county or the city, and I didn't want that to be the case. So I made the push to write the legislation and craft the legislation to where it's given back. Correctional facility had conversations with legal, and the governors got involved in the middle of that and agreed that to the give back. It is at the governor's desk. I don't think there'll be a problem there. It was a very unanimous in the House and the Senate. I think there's one vote against it out of everybody, so there's always that one. And but it's a great it's a good opportunity to give something back to the community, to whether it creates the ability of an industrial park, a couple businesses in there. It's not a huge piece of property. It's not a great piece of property, but it does allow for something that may not have federal or may not be immune to property tax to come on to the payrolls to generate revenue and property tax. So I'm excited about that. So I feel like that's going to get done. And I don't see any reason she'd veto it.
That's great.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things that it came out of those discussions was the possibility of a rail hub. But the topography maybe is going to make that difficult.
Great point. I think the length and the topography make that a tough point, a tough opportunity. If you find additional adjoining pieces at some point, you might have a length that's long enough for a switch or something to go into that. But I think that's going to be a tough conversation as it sits today.
Right.
And also the topography that you mentioned is real. You're down in a floodplain at the bottom of it, but up at the top, it's really a sloped piece of property. There's probably an efficient use for 2 or 3 different businesses to go in there, and then the rest would be down near the rail track, but also in the floodplain.
Right.
Yeah.
But a better opportunity for rail would be Caw Valley.
A better opportunity for rail is Caw Valley. That is a fair statement. Yes. So are you asking my opinion of Caw Valley?
Well, I was going to bring up the letter that you wrote to the county commission. It was read at last week's county commission meeting.
Oh, it was. Okay.
Yes, and it definitely conveyed a positivity toward having Union Pacific have a rail hub, and you seem to be in favor of the project in general. Is that fair?
I think that's a fair point, yes. So when I look at, and I've spent some time considerable time with the groups on the topic, and what I would say is I know the county's going through a very diligent process to understand and hone in on what's needed to move that project forward. There is a vocal group that is against it, and it's nice to see that the process allows for concerns and to be brought up in the process. So I think that's all part of the process of what gets me excited about government in general, where people have a say. And when I look at that opportunity, there's wear and tear on roads, there's other things. The rail as it sits today with a single user to use it, I don't know how it justifies. But if you create an opportunity for a couple companies to come into that space, it absolutely does justify. And I've had conversations with Union Pacific as well as the Rail Association, and there is an appetite to be a part of that and maybe putting rail in there. So I think that is a very real possibility. Where I kind of took the conversations, I'm going to set up a conversation with rail, with leadership, local county leadership, and really have a conversation around what is necessary to craft a financial model that works.
Right.
So, and whether that's a fund that gets created, so any group that comes in has to pay into a rail fund, something that makes it very clear from the beginning that rail is the expectation. We're going to do a few things maybe in the interim, but there's a fund that's put together, because if you got a $2 million expense for each switch you want to put in, you got a minimum of 2. I think that gets to be a pricey cost. It's too costly for a single group like CAW to have to foot that bill.
Right.
But I think about the opportunity to put pressure on CAW to move over to the area, to create an opportunity, because that sand is so valuable. It is one of the only, if not the only, type of sand that goes into a certain type of process that's done domestically. And I think that we should be giving a real solid look at these types of organizations that do generate property tax, that generate revenue for our county. We continue to look for ways to, we continue to look for opportunities to bring that type of revenue into our county, because we are a little bit lopsided with a higher amount of federal installation and property tax, where property tax is not paid on a lot of our rooftops.
Right.
And I think that this creates those opportunities. And I think there's real opportunities for other complementing businesses to come into that space. And it needs to be done in a responsible way that also takes care of our environment that's out in that area.
Right.
Because people moved out there for a reason, and I don't want to lose sight of that. So there's a whole lot of complexity there. I feel that the county is doing their due diligence. I'd like to see it move a little faster, so it gives a clear indication that the Leavenworth County is open for business.
Right.
But I do feel that the commissioners are trying to look at every aspect of it, because it's going to be a contentious vote when it finally comes to a head, and they're going to want to have all of the data to make a good decision.
Right. So one of your pet projects, though, has been the Star Bonds project at Leavenworth Plaza.
Yes.
So what's happening with that? What's the update?
You know, there's a lot of information out there on Star Bonds, whether it's the Chiefs or our little world of Leavenworth.
Right.
And I think there's points on both sides of it that are relevant or real. You know, you look at the frustration in Wyandotte County, where folks are saying, whatever comes back to the community when you do these Star Bond projects.
Right.
If we're just utilizing Star Bonds, it's a very lucrative process. It's one that is a great incentive that minimizes risk to the state. But when local government also layers in property tax abatements or gives credits or other kinds of incentives, then you start to see very little coming back to the community for a long period of time, whether it's 20 or 30 years based on the length of a Star Bond project.
Right.
And I think you see some of that in Wyandotte County, whether it's with the racetrack or some of the things that are being built out there. And I've had very strong opinions about don't give away property tax. It's what we use as a state.
Right.
And I think if it continues down that path, you're going to see the state probably put some guardrails on Star Bonds that limit the ability of local to utilize property tax, because it gets hard when you have such a wonderful opportunity and everybody sees these shiny pieces of new opportunity come through. And you think about Leavenworth with a dilapidated mall that's been vacant for 20 years. It has folks living in the Sears that are probably, addicted to things. And it's really an eyesore in the main part of our community. And so when I was looking at Star Bonds, historically it's made for large investments that bring a lot of new people into our state, such as the Chiefs, Mattel Theme Park, American Royal, Sporting KC, which is paid off, Nebraska Furniture Mart. All of that's creating about $35 million a year in additional revenue back into the Wyandotte County. And so, but if it's done correctly, I think there's ways that it can be viewed as a wonderful asset. I think about Leavenworth, they're right in the middle of this, and I feel like the commission that's there is really looking at the opportunity. They're doing I would say a solid job on figuring out what's going to be great opportunities for our community. When I look at, so 2 years ago, there was no legislation for this. We crafted legislation, and I was the sponsor and helped move that forward in Commerce in the Senate. And that legislation allowed us to look at smaller communities with dilapidated malls and make the requirements quite a bit less than a Chiefs or something like that.
Right.
And then I ended up bringing some of the billionaires from around the area up to look at our space to understand there's real opportunity in the first city of Kansas and in Leavenworth County just in general. And so what's come of that is a good opportunity. I think there's right now where it sits, it's in the city's hands. They're running their own revenue study to make sure that when they pull this trigger, they're making a wise decision. And I think that was a responsible thing to do. And hopefully that comes back fairly quickly, because the legislation's only written through the end of the year.
Oh, okay.
So there's going to be a lot of motivation. I have consistent conversations with the Department of Commerce. And so everyone is going to make sure we don't miss timelines here.
Right.
But what we do want is the right thing to come into the community, the right stores, the right draw. You have to have a draw that brings in 20% new people.
Okay.
And one of the benefits of some of the stores that are being looked at is you look at where leakage occurs in buying habits in our community, where people are going outside of our community to buy things.
Right.
You try and focus on those types of stores to come back so you can keep the money here, because right now it's leaving our community, but also bring in 20% new people through a draw. And there's a couple of draws that are being looked at that are kind of fun, and I'll let the city announce those at the right time. But I'm happy they're doing the due diligence to make sure that we're going to tee up our city for success. And there's 2 or 3 different pieces of property that'll be a part of that. That should be really really fun. I tried to get my wonderful city of Lansing into the middle of this because we have a golf course and we have some other things that are wonderful pieces of property.
Yes.
And the fact that this is such a new adjustment to Star Bonds, I think when you cross city lines and you merge 2 cities, it's not like a big Chiefs deal where every city and the Star Bond district is huge. But they were concerned that we were going to get ourselves into a point where we might not be successful.
Oh.
So, but it's on my list to try and figure that out and see if there's an opportunity as an add-on at a later date or for its own. So there's some really good pieces of property that could be really valuable to the community for growth.
Yeah. So you mentioned your list. So let's talk about your list for the remainder of the session. What are you really hoping to see come to fruition?
I would like to see some version of 1616 or 1603 constitutional amendment on assessed value of taxes get over the goal line.
Okay.
There's a couple thoughts around what can we tee up to send to the House so they can be successful. It's a finicky group over there. There's a lot of different personalities, and I would say that for our communities, the Dave Beelers, the Pat Proctors, Tim Johnsons, those folks are voting how we would like them to vote, in the sense that they are understanding the pain of valuation increases on property, and they're looking to help cap that or curb that. And all of their votes have been in such a way to show that that's the right direction that we need to go. And I've been really proud of their efforts. However, there's a handful of, especially out west and Johnson County area, where they've been a little more stubborn on their voting.
Okay.
And but I would say it doesn't matter what door you go to, whether it's left or right, Johnson County, Western Kansas, they're all asking for property tax relief.
Right.
And we do have a little bit of some third-party interests that are weighing in with strong points of view without supporting data. And I'm not looking to pick fights with them today, but I think we have a little too much of that. And I would like the legislature to look at the facts on the ground, pull the trigger on things that can be impactful for our community, for all the communities, 105 counties in the state of Kansas. And it's because there is real pain out there, and a limitation or a restriction on the amount of property tax people are paying would be a good start. It's not a finish, it's a start of a process. We need to improve the appraisal process, and then you have this revenue limitations that we just ran on the city that's created a few frustrations with city officials as is, but I think hopefully we can make that better. Because if we don't run the amendments, we may have to follow with amendments next year, because I do feel like the cities in anything that we run have the ability to raise taxes to whatever they want.
Right.
The challenge is the community and the citizens have the ability to say, not today. And so that's what this legislation did. That's a simple way to look at it. There's a lot more details in that create more frustrations for city managers. And when you're trying to, your bonding and how you're paying back notes and what you put in there for a percentage of interest and all of that goes into making decisions, I think it creates a little bit of more headache than they'd like. hopefully we can tweak that. And I was trying to run those amendments in real time, and I wasn't successful on doing that. But I think everybody with the votes, like I mentioned earlier, there might be a window of opportunity to come back and do that. That's, I think, you have this what's called an override period where the governor's going to veto some things, and we got to decide, do we really want to attempt to override those types of things? And there'll be a handful of those that we do. But the vast majority of things will go through because, I think on 80% of what we run, there's agreement on both sides. It's just we get onto the edges and it's and she'll start to weigh in on that she doesn't like what we're doing. So, which is her prerogative. I mean, people put her in office and I think she's going to show that she says no to a few things, and we'll decide if we want to override those or not. So
give me an example of what sort of amendment you're talking about. Like what changes to the appraisal process would there be?
So if the word cap seems to be toxic in the House.
Okay.
All right. So can we look at things in a way of but rolling average seems to be well appreciated over there.
Okay.
But if you do a rolling average and you're averaging 10 to 15%, your rolling average is of a very high number, and it's unsustainable. And we should be disappointed we're taxing seniors and those on fixed income at those kind of rates. So if you take a rolling average and you take all of the property taxes paid in the state of Kansas, excluding new construction, and you come up with a single number, say it's a 5-year rolling average.
Okay.
You'd probably be around 6%.
Okay.
As a couple of the really high years roll off, that rate comes down. So you say, let's keep this very simple because it has to go to the poll for voters to vote on.
Right.
So we say we're going to do a 5-year rolling average, excluding new, hard stop. And that would be about 6%. So if your home value comes in at, say it's 15%, the rolling average would be 6. You take the lower of the two.
Gotcha.
If your valuation came in at 4.5%, you say, I want that. I'm not taking the 6.
Right.
So it's a limitation or a restriction that allows you, and you would know that early in the process so you could budget and plan, and you kind of know where that falls. Historically, that ranges between 2.5% and 5%,
right,
based on market conditions.
Right.
That gets us more to something that moves with market conditions, which is also appealing, and versus a hard cap that's in the Constitution, which had some no votes as a result of that. That might get us there. I'm not sure of the appetite there. I think we have some, I feel like that's the best option that might get us over the goal line to getting something that can relieve the crazy increases. We'd like to, so when the Senate ran it, we ran it for 3 years. It's a 3% cap that goes back to 2022 levels. The impact of that is a huge fiscal note because a lot of people have been building budgets locally on a much higher number.
Right.
So that creates a whole nother conversation. But I think that was your biggest give back to taxpayers was, hey, we're going to go back to 2022 levels before things went crazy.
Right.
And I'm not sure fiscally that's doable, but that was what we've ran for 3 years. And to receive so few votes in the House has been discouraging and disappointing. But I do feel there's some creative middle ground. So at some point you have to, adapt and move in a direction that's going to allow for compromise to move us forward together. And this might be the opportunity to do so.
So do you feel like this has been the most contentious piece of legislation, or what has been the most contentious piece of legislation this session?
The large pharmacy on the $10.50 ad, where rural pharmacies can add $10.50 to every script.
Oh.
So I stood up and talked against that bill.
Right.
But it was overwhelmingly ran and approved in the House and the Senate. And I think it's really easy to hate PBOs. I mean, I don't like PBOs either. So, but we had a bill that started with, let's just run transparency and make sure everything's being documented, showing how they're abusing folks if they are.
Okay.
And that was going to be very transparent. But what happened, there was an amendment put on that said, we're also going to allow rural pharmacies to tack on $10.50. So at some point, the language that was coming out of that was, well, the end consumer is not going to pay that. I'm not sure who pays it at that point. Everybody's saying they're not paying it.
Okay.
Somebody's going to have to pay for it. It usually falls on the weakest voice, which is the consumer.
Right.
So my feeling was, first of all, we've never in the history of Kansas had the legislature put a fixed number on a piece of legislation. It's not our responsibility. We're now saying we're weighing in on helping a business and saying you can now charge this. I in my head I was thinking of a single mom, kid has an ear infection, all of a sudden she has to pay $10.50 more for a script. It may not be that impactful, but it could be a worst case scenario. And I'm just like, you know what? I don't think we should be doing that. I'd rather see the transparency. And if they are abusing folks, you hit them hard the next season. But it's easy to take a swing at PBOs. But go ahead.
Can you define PBOs for people who may not know what that is?
It's a middle group that plays a role. It's a middleman group that plays a role, and they generate billions of dollars. It's a large group that gets in the middle of how we allocate funding for prescriptions.
Okay.
And it's one of those groups that it's easy to dislike, as I was saying. And being a fiscal conservative and kind of limited on scope, I'm not always thinking it's best to craft legislation that pinches businesses. But at the end of the day, the body spoke. There's a penalty on that. We'll see if hopefully it doesn't transition directly to the consumer. And I think that will be a good tell. We'll know in a year if that did or not. But that was one. I was standing up on the floor and I was talking to that one because I didn't think it was our role to play in the legislature. And it was a good learning for me. I don't lose too often, and that was one that was like, it was an interesting. So I learned a lot in that process, and sometimes it's easy to pick on the big mean gorilla because it's politically advantageous to do so. It's optically good, but it's and I don't want my local pharmacies. I have one in Basehor,
right,
to think that I don't care about them because I think they're really a centerpiece of many of these small communities, especially out west. And it got to where they're mad because hey, Jeff's speaking against our rural pharmacies, and we might go under if we don't get this. But I'm thinking it's not the role to add on fees to keep you in business. Where you're in business to be competitive. It's not as simple as I'm making it because I do think there's real reasons that the pharmacies were pushing for that.
Right.
So they have great points, and at the end of the day, their legislation moved over the goal line, and so they'll be able to take advantage of that. And if it helps a lot of them stay around and stay in business, I think anytime we're keeping a business here in Kansas, it's a good thing.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So those were all the questions I had for
I
you,
have
but
more.
you've got to have
Yes,
stuff
I
that
brought
you
a binder.
wanted to talk about.
I did want to talk about. Now I have to
Yes.
put my old man glasses back on.
It's okay.
So it's so there's fun things. So I ran a bill this year. So now that I figured out how to run bills, I was trying to run bills that were impactful to our state. So
Okay.
I ran a bill, Senate Bill 497. It's a Kratom bill.
Okay.
So if you haven't heard of Kratom or 70H, there's stores and CBD stores and gas stations that are selling that in the state of Kansas.
Yes, I've heard. Yes.
So that is some of the facts that I was looking at when I was hearing about this. I was taking a tour of a drug testing lab.
Right.
And they said, hey, here's a fun fact. Since the border's been shut down, historically before the border was shut down, we'd have 1.5% of all drug tests that would have fentanyl in them.
Okay.
So then since the border's been shut down, 0.3% of all drug tests have fentanyl in them, of those that are being tested.
Okay.
So there was a drop, and we associated, because of that data, that because the border's closed, we can maybe make an assessment that part of that reduction was due to the border. This isn't a border discussion today, but but what we saw was a 1.3% rise in Kratom, the synthetic version. So what you have is a leaf product that I think has some properties that some could argue are non-addictive and helps relieve pain.
Right.
Because some people are taking the product. The 70H with addictive properties is more addictive than heroin. And we had a whole lot of folks on each side of this come in and testify. But at the end of the day, it was more addictive than oxycodone and more potent than heroin.
Oh, wow.
And that's kind of what we stuck with. There was groups that came in and said, well, that's not true. And so we went back and forth, but then we had a lot of testimony from kids that have gotten onto that where it's run their lives. And so we had some real good proponents that came in, and a lot of the stores, like CBD stores, came in and testified against it.
Right.
And so at the end of the day, we brought in the KBI, the Attorney General Office. So we crafted a piece of legislation, and when you're new, you just kind of start running sometimes. So I brought them all together, and I said, well, this is a big deal. We'd like to try and run some legislation that's responsible. And what came out of that was 497, which does make it a Schedule 1. So it is illegal. And from talking with the sheriff's departments and law enforcement, they felt that you had to throw in leaf product as well, because it's not manageable with staffs that they currently have with officers to be able to determine percentages and all of the details of what the product is. So you just can't sell kratom. We're hitting on a topic that's important because Kansas City, Missouri was looking to make it illegal just in the city. Okay. And they don't mind their weed and other drugs over there. So if that's their thinking, we know we're on the right track. And I know from talking to the city of Leavenworth, they were looking to run legislation themselves. So that was it was a nice win for the state. And the governor still has to approve that, but I don't think there'll be a problem.
So was this something that kids were ODing on, or?
So that's a good question. I think they would argue that it's of the folks that have passed, they all had something else in their systems as well. So the feeling is that it's a gateway, or it's a way to relieve pain, and it creates addictive thought processes that migrate you to other things.
Okay.
And so especially what you're seeing is folks, this 7-OH happened to be a Chinese product that they put in addictive properties into it to make it much more potent. And I think when you're making anything that's synthetic from a leafy product or a natural product, maybe there's a hard stop that says all of those synthetic products have to go through an approval process before they just migrate to, 17-year-old kids can go in a grocery store or a gas station and buy it.
Right.
And it's, so it was the next cool thing. All that's going to happen is they're going to continue to take this addictive property, move it into something else. So there's probably some additional legislation to just kind of do a pause on synthetic and let's try and figure that out.
Gotcha.
So,
okay.
So that was one. It was, it was a good piece of legislation. So, and the other one I would say is, I put it here at the back, which the Tyler and Logan bill.
Tyler and Logan.
Yeah. Senate Bill 374.
I think, yeah.
So we had, and that was, there's a loophole in the system that allows, if you're deemed mentally incompetent and you're being tried for a severe crime, and in this case, we have Tara Reek, whose boys were killed by their dad.
Right.
And that's an ongoing case for the last 5 years. It's just been unacceptable how the pain of dragging this out with an uncertainty to say you haven't been convicted, but you're deemed incompetent. And you look at that, and all of a sudden there's conversation where you're not a danger to society, but you're not convicted. And are you really going to let this guy out? And that's where this loophole continues to be this loophole in the system. There's like 11 cases in the state of Kansas. And I think there's really throughout the United States. So we crafted a piece of legislation, again, with the AG, as well as Todd Thompson on the county side. He did a great job kind of helping with this process and being a part of it. And so actually, I think he started with the crafting of the legislation and moved it on to the AG to be proofed and perfected. And so we brought them in for hearings, and it was a very emotional process. You see in judiciary, you see the whole committee is like, this is really this is unacceptable. And it's so we're able to craft legislation that allows for that loophole and to be filled and fixed. And so now it's at the governor's desk as well. There's a lot sitting with the governor right now.
A lot.
We would absolutely, and it's where it goes. It's part of the process.
Right.
It's it was, I think, 37 or 39 to 1. So it's a very bipartisan issue that was corrected.
Right.
Even in the House, it was very a majority. So I don't think there'll be any problem. It's a very good bipartisan piece of legislation that says it's really, and it affects, and the folks that it affects are so significant and it's so painful. You almost have to disengage from the conversation if you're in those moments. And it's, so I took that on. It was for my community as well. And I was really proud to get that over the goal line and building consensus and moving this forward in a way that received a lot of votes. And I was really proud of Tara, who came up and was a proponent to the bill, and her and her family did a great job, the girls, and we're all there in support. So it was a good day when we were able to get that over the goal line.
Right.
So let's see here. I know we're running out of time.
Yeah.
So, and I'll move. A good thing for our treasurers. I ran a bill this year to let our treasurers put a small fee on transactions.
Okay.
They continued for years. They've never received an increase. And I think they felt this year they weren't going to get anything as well. So, but I moved forward some legislation and made we brought that in transportation. I'm vice chair in trans, and so I ran that motion, and it was approved, and we were able to get it through the House and the Senate. We had some tweaks in it, and it started at, hey, you can add on a fee of up to $15 for transactions, and we've moved that down to $10. But what it does, it gives the locals the ability to manipulate an amount. And I think our folks are so sensitive to what consumers want. They're not just going to say, we're just going to take the $10, like Overland Park might do $3.20,
Okay.
because they feel like that's needed to help cover the costs of this requirement. And I think the counties and the treasurers, if I was making anybody happy this year, the treasurers, I think, like me, which is a good win. So they talk to everybody. So I think it was a great move. And we have our treasurer here and really in the entire area that I know they're fantastic folks. So most of it happen to be women. But
So what would the fee be used for?
so if there's a transaction, today they have, if you go in and you pay, you do a transaction, they have the ability to tack on a small fee. If you have a second facility, there's an automatic fee. If there's an online application, something gets paid. There has not been a fee, but whether it's an online application, the way the systems are so antiquated, the online application, it's efficient for the user. However, it still means the folks of the Treasurer's Department are doing a ton of work.
Okay.
And so it's, anytime you're adding a fee to the people, they're exhausted with fees and payments of everything. So, but in the sense of it's been, decades since they've been allowed to raise any kind of a fee to help subsidize some of the, today in that fee, they would be increasing the mill rate to cover the expenses.
Right.
So that, so versus saying if you have it's more transactional related.
Right.
I have a car, I have a piece of property, I have something, and it's, there's a small fee that's going to be associated with those things. And it was an interesting debate. It's like, do you put a fee on something or do you not? And our treasurers, they've been barking for years to get something. So it's
like an administrative fee.
Administrative fee.
Gotcha.
They call it a transactional fee. So it's more scrutinized, and it lets the county commission have more of they can see the data and decide if they like how they're being administered. And,
right.
And so it gave a little more local control with the counties to be able to look at things in a certain way so we changed the definition to transaction as well.
Okay.
So
that makes sense.
Great. And I think land transfer, we've already talked about. Mm-hmm. We did also put in the hands of the county where they can, they always have to come to the legislature and say, hey, we want to run a bill to have 1% sales tax to cover something.
Right.
And so it's like, you got to come ask us. We always say yes. If you're going to put it on the ballot, I don't know why we need to say yes, because you're going to put it on the ballot and ask the question. So we ran legislation so stops wasting their time and coming to the Capitol and say, if you want to run a piece of legislation that's going to go on the ballot to raise fees or a 1% increase in sales tax, or for up to 2% on the other side for development opportunities, run it on the ballot. If the folks decide they want it, the folks are who makes the final decision here.
Right.
So, those are the things. And I had another 38 pages of legislation that I could brag about and feel like there's some things in there that are just okay, but there's a lot of really good stuff in there. So.
But it's been a jam-packed session in general.
Goodness.
I mean,
a little too fast, maybe. I could argue I would rather have the 10 extra days that we had last year.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be helpful and start the process on property tax more as we're making small advancements. We educate both sides early on, and we start, so we're not waiting till the last minute. There's good learnings in this whole process. For me, I sit on commerce, I sit on transportation, I'm vice chair on transportation, I sit on taxation, and I sit on ways and means, managing the budget.
Right.
And what I can tell you is we funded education, and the frustrating part is we're not bringing in more money, but we are spending more money. And do you want to give education and special needs more money? And the answer would be yes. And there's always going to be folks that are really frustrated we're not putting enough into those things. I feel we do put enough into those things. I'd like to see the results start to improve better. However, that would be do a whole show on just that topic. And it's and I do think there's good arguments on both sides. But we ran some educational things. We ran a whole lot of things that some will like, some won't. But that's how we sit today in politics.
Right.
So I appreciate taking the time to chat with you. It's always fun to come in and talk to you. Well, you or Ken historically about kind of the successes we're having, and I really look forward to coming. And contentious issues are just fine. I like to come in prepared, and those are all good things. And I study legislation. My days are long, and I'm kind of glad I see an end in sight because I also run businesses, and so I'll get to slow down a little bit on that and move over to the business side for a little bit. But
good.
It's all good.
Well, I really, really appreciate you coming. It's always great to see you, and we will certainly have you back.
Sounds great.
So you have been watching Movers and Shakers. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.